Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. First, I want to say welcome to the 11th Annual Family Matters Conference, sponsored by Philadelphia Family Pride. My name is Stream Burrows. I'm the board chair here at Philadelphia Family Pride. I use he, him pronouns. And this conference is one of our biggest events of the year, and we are so happy that you are able to join us today. A special welcome to those of you outside the Philly area. We have folks registered as far away as Vermont, California, and DC. I know it's pretty early there, but thank you for being up at, 9:30 now? So being up at 6:30 in the morning to join us today at the conference. It's great. We've been able to pivot in these uncertain times, like many groups have, to holding virtual events. We miss being together in person and seeing how big everyone's kids are getting over the years, but we didn't want to miss the opportunity to hold this event. You'll see from the programming that we've worked hard to make the sessions speak to the times we're living in. Topics will include racial justice, the pandemic, and the upcoming election. On that note, if you live in PA and need to help register to vote, checking your voter status, or finding early voting locations, please visit votespa.com or talk to someone here at the conference. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure that everyone can get out there and vote. Thank you to our presenters running today's workshops, especially to PFP parents who are sharing their expertise and stories. Thanks to all our sponsors, especially our diamond sponsors, American Reading Company, Mainline Fertility, and RMA of Philadelphia. This event wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. Please visit the virtual sponsor fair between 12 and 1. Download and peruse the PDF programs that include sponsor ads and pick up your virtual swag at the link chat in the event. Also, thank you to all the board directors of PFP. We really appreciate the time and effort that you've all put into this, as well as our members of our conference planning committee, our conference coordinator, Taylor Goldberg, my old intern. She's done a great job. And executive director, of course, Stephanie Haynes, for organizing this event again. A few notes about participating today from our community guidelines. Don't assume anyone's gender identity and or sexual orientation based on their name, gender expression, or relationship status. If you make a mistake, apologize, correct yourself, and move on. We're all human here. Be careful not to interrupt others when they're speaking. You can use reactions to raise your hands or physically raise your hand if your video is on to speak next. And if your video cuts out, just wave your hand so people know that you're still on mute. If you are someone who talks a lot, step back and let others share so you can take on the listening role. If you're someone who is usually listening, step up and make your voice heard. Again, whatever you're comfortable with at this moment. Be open to others' opinions, ideas, and points of view. And thank you again for attending. And before I move on to my fellow vice chair, Jazia, she's right there in the spotlight, I just want to say that this is very interesting times that we're in. And also, as a Black dad, I want to say Black Lives Matter. And I really want to give PFP a shout out for participating in the March for Black Trans Lives. That was a big thing. And we are going to be a part of change. And this is not a fad. This is going to keep going. So knees up, everyone. We got a lot of work to do. And with that said, Jadzia, take it away.
Hi, I'm Jadzia Axelrod. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the vice chair of the PFP board. So a few things about how to do Zoom conferences, because this is new to everyone. You want to check the link in the chat to download the PDF program, where you'll find all the workshop listings and schedules for today. Links to all the sessions are emailed out to registrants. If you need another copy of that email, just let us know in the chat. That's what the chat's for. This session is being recorded. Anything in the chat will also be saved in the chat's transcript. You can look in the program to find which sessions are being recorded today and which ones are not. The ones that are not recorded are marked with 3 asterisks. You can see if a session is being recorded in the upper left of your scene where it says recording. We will also be taking screen grabs in the sessions that are recorded, but not the ones that aren't. So there will be documentation of the sessions that are recorded. The ones who are not recorded, no documentation. If you're posting on social media about the event, please use the hashtag PFPConAtHome, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's PFPCONATHOME. And that's in the chat for just some easy copy pasting.
Yep.
The following sessions will be live closed captioned by Typewell. The transcriber will put links in the chat for how to access the captions. This first session, the COVID-19 and the kids session at 11:15 a.m., the Talking to Kids About Race and Racism session at 1 p.m., and the closing plenary at 3 p.m. will be called the closed captioned. Transcripts of all the recorded sessions will be auto-generated by Zoom. At the end of each session, a link to an online evaluation will be put in the chat. Please take the time to give us feedback on the sessions we're offering this year. We're trying a lot of different things here, so letting us know what works and what doesn't would be so helpful. There will be an online survey about the entire conference you can fill out in the coming days, so watch for that email. Now, a few notes about the community guidelines, which got emailed to you with the conference links. Consider including your pronouns along with your name on your Zoom window name tag. To do this, click on Participants in the main Zoom window, hover over your name, click More, and then Rename. Very basic. Mute your audio unless you are speaking to cut down on background noise and distractions during sessions. If your audio is a distraction, the Zoom host in that meeting may mute your audio so the session is enjoyable and distraction-free for everyone. Just send them a chat if you'd like to be turned on and ask a question, and they'll be happy to do that. Now, we understand that kids and pets may visit you while you're attending the sessions today. That's fine. We love kids and pets. That's what we're all about. We just ask that if you're in a moving vehicle or otherwise show something overly distracting in your video, that you turn off the camera as needed. Use reactions to raise your hand, to speak, or otherwise react to what's being said in the meeting. You can find reactions in the main Zoom menu. To change the skin tone of the hands, you can go to Settings and General. These automatically go away after 10 seconds. Finally, use the chat to ask the questions of the speakers in the session. You can send a private chat messages to the host if you have technical issues or questions, or email Stephanie at phillyfamilypride.org or Taylor at phillyfamilypride.org during the day. And I just want to say, personally, as a white mom, Black Lives Matter. Adding that in there. And thank you all for attending. And we can't wait to safely get back to holding in-person events. Back to you, Tareem.
Thank you, Jazia. All right, so let's get started. Our first program today is our keynote conversation. The title of this session is Resistance is Not a Spectator Sport, Racial Reckoning in LGBTQ Life and Community. I'll now turn it over to PFP parent and faith organizer, Naomi Washington-Leapheart. Hey, Naomi. Who will be moderating this session. Thank you, Naomi, and take it away.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I am delighted to be here with you to sort of give some direction and prompts for our keynote conversation this morning. Before we get started, I want to just give a little bit of framing for this conversation. Why is this the topic of discussion for this conference? Resistance is not a spectator sport. As we were talking about how we could frame this conversation, keeping in mind that we are experiencing concurrent pandemics, right? The newest one to us, which is COVID-19, but some centuries old, I would say, pandemics related to injustice for vulnerable people, marginalized people, and particularly Black, Brown, Indigenous folks. And so we wanted to first start by saying that resistance is not a spectator sport, that to resist, one must actively engage, actively invest in every area of life, including within the family. So we want to talk about what it would mean to resist as queer people, as queer families, to acknowledge and disrupt white supremacy as we see it in LGBTQ plus spaces and communities. We want to talk mainly about what it means to build a revolutionary-minded queer family, right? What does it mean for your family to be in resistance? And so I'm excited to welcome our guests to the conversation. I want to have them introduce themselves and say a little bit about the work that they're doing, and then we'll get started in our discussion. I'm just going to invite Kris to start us off. I see Kris first in the windows. So Kris, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Kris Henderson. I use they, them pronouns. I am a part of Amistad Project, and I have a wonderful cat here who is trying to also introduce herself. Hi. Her name is Pete, P-Y-T. And Amistad Law Project, we represent people in prison. We advocate for just criminal legal policies and organize against mass incarceration and for alternatives to imprisonment. Currently, a lot of our work has been around trying to get folks out of the state system during this pandemic, and also trying to defund the Philadelphia Police Department. We, along with our allies, were successful in getting a multi-million-dollar increase to the Philadelphia Police Department, nixed, but we have not yet gotten the cuts that we're hoping for. I think that's something that is a continuing battle and struggle and fight. And those are I'll say more later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kris. Let's go to Celena.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Celena Morrison. I use she, her, and hers pronouns, and I am the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs. The work that we do in my office, we develop city policy regarding civil rights issues affecting LGBTQ people. We help enact policies and programs to meet the city's diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. We support the growth and also the development of the city's LGBTQ communities. And in addition to all of that, we provide education about the needs of the LGBTQ community.
Thank you, Celena. Let's go to Alicia.
Hello all. I am Alicia Crosby. I use she, her pronouns. I am a writer, speaker, minister, podcaster, professional question asker. But I am super, super excited to be here with y'all this morning. I'm a native New Yorker who's living in Durham, North Carolina right now, and excited to be a part of this because my work, regardless of what way it comes forward, is helping communities of folks think through what justice seeking might look like for them. And so sometimes that community is like, family groups like yours. Other times it's nonprofits or corporate entities. But nonetheless, I am really excited to dream and imagine with folks today.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. And I'm Naomi. I use she, her pronouns. I am a rabble rouser, and I'm trying to figure out what it means to be faithful in public, faithful to my political commitments and faithful to my spiritual commitments. And so I wear a couple of different hats in doing so. I'm also living into the identity of spouse, wife, mother, and figuring out ways to be faithful to my commitment to family as well. So that's who I am. And we'll just kick off this conversation. I will say that we may receive one additional guest to our conversation. So when they arrive, I'll just graciously welcome them and we'll just keep right on talking. So I don't want that to be disruptive, so I'll give you a heads up about that. So let's just ask the difficult question right away. How does anti-Blackness exist within LGBTQ plus communities? I remember a panel that I was on a few years ago, and about this very topic. And one of the things we tried to say was that queerness does not dilute one's anti-Blackness, that being part of LGBTQ plus community doesn't mean that one's racial analysis is tight. And so let's talk about some specific ways that that anti-Blackness shows up in LGBTQ plus spaces. Anybody want to start that conversation?
I can start.
Yes.
Well, because I have a lengthy history in doing a lot of nonprofit work here in the city, when I first came here, initially I was just overwhelmed by the resources that were available in the city for trans and gender nonconforming folks, and the community that was held here for LGBT folks. The fact that there was just an area called the Gayborhood, I thought that was so amazing. They had rainbows on the streets, and it was just awesome. Which I'm not to take anything away from any of that, but once I started to get into the work that I was doing and learn some of the inner workings of some of the nonprofits that serve the community, I started to realize that a lot of the things that we were being paid to resist and to go up against and to fight were actually happening within those same organizations. We were paid to educate other local organizations and communities and groups and establishments. And some of the things that I saw that would happen within those organizations was the very thing that I was being paid to resist.
Yeah. So there's an inability to introspectively apply some of the same principles. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I hear you saying.
Yeah.
What else would you say, Kris or Alicia?
I mean, I think in thinking about the Gayborhood, one of the things that we've seen repeatedly over the past several years is like all of the attention to the racism and anti-Blackness in the Gayborhood in lots of different spaces. I'm also thinking about the fight for quote unquote marriage equality and the ways in which that has primarily benefited and impacted white families, especially white gay male families. Hey, this cat is biting me. I have no idea why. And how a lot of, especially Black and brown, especially women-led queer families, the issues that primarily impact them are not solved by marriage equality. Also thinking of the many Black trans women who are killed every year, and how marriage equality is not something that's going to solve that, it's going to fix that. And the ways in which we as a community should be trying to keep the folks who are most marginalized, who are most vulnerable in our community safe.
Thank you, Kris. So I hear you talking about a single-mindedness as it relates to our advocacy agenda as LGBTQ plus community. Reminded of what Audre Lorde told us, right? That we don't lead single issue lives, and so our advocacy campaigns shouldn't be single issue or focused on a singular subgroup of our LGBTQ plus community. Yeah. Alicia.
So as I hold this question, I start thinking about space. Who gets space, and whether that be like a literal physical space or like space in our minds. So before I moved to North Carolina, I was in Chicago for several years. And Chicago also has its Gayborhood. And I started a nonprofit with a friend where we were having conversations around identity and specifically like working to elevate the need for LGBTQ inclusion in varied populations. And one of the things that we first noticed is that all of these LGBT groups rooted themselves in the Gayborhood as if that's where all LGBT folks lived in the city. And the reality is that Black and brown, but more often than not, Black folks were kicked out of the neighborhood, specifically Black youth. And so you had like multi-million-dollar, like well-funded, well-resourced, you know, LGBTQ organizations saying that they had a queer politic, calling the police on young Black folks who were unhoused and were trying to receive services, but because they didn't have anywhere to go afterwards and were just trying to be in a neighborhood that supposedly reflected them, they were told that there's not space for you here. Like, there may be space for you in these doors, but outside of this, oh no, you're getting the cops called on you by people who's supposed to be like your LGBTQ kin. And, you know, that same type of mentality went into, you know, what was prioritized. I'll never forget, I think it was like 2, maybe 3 years ago, but it might've been 2 years ago. The night of Pride, it's the difference in prides, right? Like the Pride Parade is predominantly, you know, corporate and white led, whereas there were other celebrations of LGBTQ identity and flourishing in different parts of the city. But those other things got, again, the police were called, they were broken up, whereas the police actually started and protected this other parade. So it's like, who gets to occupy space? Who gets to take up space? Who gets to take up room? And I remember specifically 2 years ago, the night of Pride, a bunch of like Black, queer, and trans folks like flooded the neighborhood, and the bars made the decision in Chicago to shut down because it was dangerous. It became like, you know, unruly. And it wasn't, it was just people celebrating. But the fact that they were Black folks celebrating, that became a threat to these white club owners. And, you know, they called the cops. They put people in harm's way. Well, we're having conversations, you know, across this country about the ways that police brutality is waged on folks. Why would you, as queer kin, call the cops on folks who are supposed to be your family? Why can't that space be afforded to them? So yeah, the question of space is what comes forward to me when we think about anti-Blackness within LGBTQ communities. Why is it that white and, quite frankly, non-Black, you know, LGBTQ folks feel that the police are their ally when they're also saying that Black lives matter, when they're putting Black lives at risk?
Thank you so much, Celena. Celena, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. I saw you unmuted, so I didn't know whether that meant.
Yeah. Well, you know, and one, I also think about, you know, what happens when dealing with some of these organizations in the LGBTQ community is that when there are issues with Black and brown people, they are so ready to be done with it, remove you out of the program, throw you out of the building. I've been told to ban folks from the establishment, but continuously, when it was a white person, I was told, just let them do it this time. Let's not make a fuss over it. This person has been a part of this organization for 20 years, you know, we'll figure it out, you know, and we never hear anything about it. So it continuously, that behavior continues to happen over and over.
Yeah, I'm hearing what you all are saying as reflective of this idea that Blackness in itself is disruptive, is criminal, is an affront to kind of white normativity. So to what extent do we want queer spaces to be reflective of white normativity, even as we say things like Black Lives Matter, even as we give lip service to resistance and revolution? So I'm hearing you say that. And then just yesterday, thinking about what you said, Alicia, I read something around a Black woman scholar who's doing work around spatial reparations. She's trying to say, yeah, we need to think about economic reparations as a redress of the centuries of injustice and discrimination and abuse and exploitation. Let's also think about spatial reparations. And so what would it mean to say we're going to have brave and safe space for Black, queer, and trans folk in our neighborhoods, and that we will cede space, give up space, where we have taken up too much of it, perhaps, for Black and Brown and Indigenous and other people of color. Kris, I saw you unmuted. Go ahead. No, that was...
That was actually me, Naomi.
Okay, don't unmute unless you want me to call you. Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
I think another way that anti-Blackness is perpetuated within LGBTQ communities, and this is going to be one that might sting for a couple of folks, so just gear up for it, is the exploitation of Black labor and Black creativity. So on one hand, there's the bits about tokenism, right? It's like, yes, Blackness is seen as disruptive unless it can be used. And so that's one thing to think about. I've had and been personally in the position of having, running a nonprofit, people understanding this nonprofit is both queer and Black led, and being asked to come do months. I mean, we're talking like a half a year's training for free $99. Folks were not trying to pay me. It's like, wait, so you want me to sit here 6 months with your staff and have like robust, program altering conversations that shifts the way that specifically you serve Black and Brown folks for free? And let's go look at your $9.90. How much are y'all pulling in a year? Why did you feel that it was appropriate to come? And like, I had to have that conversation with folks. It's like, you say you want to be just. This is not justice. And specifically, like, you're not disrupting anti-Blackness that you know that you're being accused of if you're asking for my Black labor for free for your benefit. That's a one. A two, this goes into the cultural production bit. All of the Yas queens and, the use of language that comes from Black queer community that gets absorbed into the larger LGBTQ community, and it's appropriated. Like, folks are using, colloquialisms completely wrong, and it's because it didn't come from y'all. And I think that it needs to be said that, like, there are times, like, where even within the LGBTQ community, where folks who are non-Black take Black things and Black cultural production and act like it's their own. And that's a problem.
I just clapped on that. Celena, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Alicia just said. Honey, I was over here snapping and praising. But yes, I mean, I've seen that also where they want and expect Black folks to do that heavy lifting of educating the entire staff for free $99. But I've also seen when the Black folks were resistant to doing that, when they called in an outside organization, they were paid, I think at the time they were paid over $30,000 to come in for 3 days. But they didn't offer the Black folks anything.
Thank you so much. I want to welcome into the panel T, who has joined us. Hey T, why don't let's pause here and have you tell us who you are and what your work is.
Hey everybody, sorry for the lateness, internet problems, but my name is LaTonya T. Myers. I am the support coordinator for the Philadelphia Community Bail Fund, and our mission is to abolish the cash bail system in Philadelphia. We feel as though that no one should have to purchase their freedom. No mother, no family member should not have to pay their rent nor sell their food stamps just to get their loved ones home. So until that day, we're committed to posting the bail and liberating as many of our loved ones as we can. And we take priority on LGBTQI queer folks because we understand the terrors and the reality of what goes on behind those walls. So we're happy to say that we posted the bail up to 500 individuals that we was able to liberate, as low as $30, as high as 100,000. So that we can reconnect families and communities back together and get that support needed so that we all can be successful.
Thanks, T. We welcome you so warmly into our space. We just are talking about how anti-Blackness shows up in LGBTQ plus spaces. And I've been hearing us talk just right before you came in about the predatory behavior. I'm gonna call it predatory way in which white queer folks can sort of entice and chase Black folk in order to exploit Black labor, Black bodies. I'm thinking also about Ed Buck in Los Angeles, the white gay man who is embroiled in this investigation around the mysterious, quote unquote, deaths of young Black gay men in his home, right? So a kind of theft and plunder of Black labor, Black brilliance, Black cultural and intellectual production, and a predation, like I'm gonna groom you so that I can use you and then discard you, right? Leaving you forever traumatized and suspicious and paranoid. And I gain the benefit of having had you in my life, right? Or in my work. So T, I just want to bring you into the conversation if you've got a way to answer this question of how anti-Blackness shows up in LGBTQ plus spaces.
Thank you so much for this question. Like, I really appreciate talking and raising awareness on the exploitation of our Black and brown youth within our own community, and how that anti-Blackness perpetuates the white supremacy. When we got youth that comes into a community where they feel safe at, but they're exploited. They're taken to bathhouses because of certain situations where they don't have a place to stay. So their love and their virtue is being taken advantage of. And by the same people that go into office businesses or look down among these kids that's just trying to survive off the street. And I think that is a perpetuation of white supremacy and what goes on when we exploit our kids and then, turn your face to the reality of what they're suffering from and not showing up and being I would say rapist, that culture of exploiting our young men and our young women and forgetting about them, and I don't think that is healthy for our kids to have to go through or be exploited to drugs or be welcomed into housing to have to deal with white men just for housing or just to, do certain things to get by when they go back into their communities and they become doctors and they're this and that, but they forget about these youth that's just trying to survive. And I think that we have to stand up and talk about these issues and in the reality of what's going on in our communities and the damage, the irreversible traumatic damage that's causing our young people. Personally, I've seen friends of mine who committed suicide or who fell victim to the streets, only looking for a safe and warm place to stay, but being exploited by these white supremacist males that only want to extract what they want and leave what they don't want to deal with. And I say we stand up and we advocate for those youth and the people that are going through the system as a result of this violence and this neglect.
Yeah. Thanks, T. What you were saying reminded me of this notion of the nonprofit industrial complex, much like the prison industrial complex that exists to perpetuate itself. So I need you, Black person, brown person, trans person, to help me create the data argument for this grant that I need, right? So in some ways, I need you and I need your realities to stay static so that I can continue to pursue the funding that keeps me around, right? That what if nonprofits saw themselves as working themselves out of existence, right? So that I don't need to keep you as part of this statistical chart in order to continue to receive the funding. But instead, I use this data to tell a story, to sound the alarm about a story, and to work contrary to the system that puts you in this reality in the first place, right? But so data as a form of exploitation as part of this nonprofit industrial complex. Go ahead, Alicia.
I mean, Naomi, as I'm hearing you speak, all I'm thinking about is the fact that like whiteness demands, you know, the exploitation of Blackness. And I think, you know, when we look at like the nonprofit industrial complex, or really any industrial complex that exists, whether it be educational, whether it be nonprofit, whether it be military, or it be prison, same thing is true. In order for these things to stand, they rely on anti-Blackness. They need our oppression. They need our subjugation. They need us to stay in that place. Because when we look at the way that this country functions, it functions off the back of Black labor, off of Black subjugation. Like, that is profitable. And I think that like we'd be remiss if we didn't like keep in mind that there is money to be made in us being kept down. And you know, this is part of what needs to be upended. Like within the LGBTQ community, specifically those saying that they have a queer politic. To be queer means that like you are willing to resist and to disrupt. And if you're not disrupting that pattern that you see in all of these complexes that leave Black folks behind and specifically put, you know, boots on our necks, what are you doing? How is that queer? How, and like in specific to this context, how is that family?
Really love these probing questions. How is that queer? Question mark, side eye. How is that family? Question mark, side eye. Yeah, Kris.
I think when we're thinking about these various industrial complexes, whether it's the prison industrial complex or nonprofit industrial complex, we do really have to be looking at abolition as sort of like the answer to how we're able to do this work in a way that really at the end of the day is like ethical, because it's not ethical to try and keep folks in these oppressive systems or to try and make these oppressive systems better. We really have to be looking at how to dismantle them entirely. And, you know, how do we do this work in a way that actually is trying to liberate people, not just the individuals who are caught up in these systems, but all of us collectively, because really, you know, as long as anyone is being oppressed, all of us are really experiencing, you know, a lack of the liberation that we could have.
I want to use what you just said, Kris, as a segue to this next question. You know, we've been hearing a lot. It ain't new. Let me just name that. But we've been hearing a lot over the last 6-7 months, certainly, about abolition. You know, abolish the police, defund the police. And so I want to just pause there and have us as a panel sort of define what this means. Because I think that these concepts have been willfully misunderstood and misconstrued. And this is, again, part of white supremacy showing up to set the terms, define all the terms, jumble the terms, mislead about the terms, right? So let's talk about what is abolition. Tell us a little bit about the history of abolition as a political demand, because again, it ain't new. And what are some of the things that we need to abolish or defund? Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things about abolition is that we can look at it primarily as trying to dismantle things, as trying to take things away, whether that's prisons or police. But I think it's primarily about creating these systems so that these things are unnecessary. So when we're looking at prison abolition, it's not just about closing prisons, it's also about making sure everyone's needs are met so that there is less harm so that when people harm each other, there are ways that we can deal with that harm and lead us all to healing that don't involve creating more harm. And so, what does it look like to make sure our communities have what they need, to make sure there aren't folks who don't have homes, who can't feed themselves, who are in crisis and don't have support. I think the recent demand and this most recent uprising in defense of Black lives to defund the police has definitely been misconstrued by lots of folks. I think definitely willfully, as far as like, what does it mean to defund the police? Like there's just gonna be anarchy and everyone's gonna be running in the streets and hurting people. When really in the best case scenarios, police respond to harm after it's already occurred. Police are not in the business of making us safe preemptively, of making sure that there's actually less harm. They're just showing up after the fact and trying to lock somebody up. And, in many cases, that's also not what's happening. In the vast majority of cases when people are harmed, cops don't show up. There isn't any sort of case that's brought. People don't end up in prison. Not that those things actually keep us safe, but even the supposed tools and mechanisms that exist don't actually work most of the time. And so with the call to defund the police, it's not just about holding individual cops who hurt people accountable. It's not just about trying to make sure that this system is a little bit better, but about like, what does it look like to actually direct those resources that we currently spend on cops, on jails, on prisons in Philadelphia, over $700 million a year on the Philadelphia Police Department? What would it look like to spend even half of that money on the community resources and community programs that would actually reduce violence, that would actually make our community stronger? We give these sort of token amounts to these community programs, a few $1,000s, maybe even a couple $100,000. But like, if we spent millions of dollars on community programs, like, we would see the kind of change and the kind of safety that we actually want and need.
I really appreciate, Kris, you framing abolition as a constructive activity, right? As suspending and dismantling what is, so that there is room for something else to take shape, to materialize, to become. And so, yeah, I think I just want to underscore that. I also hear you saying that we should abolish notions of safety that are connected to, the alienation of some for the comfort of others, right? So safety is not when I don't have to be bothered with, I don't have to see, I don't have to interact with certain folk, a certain element, right? And I think notions of safety are really like this dog whistle for keep me away from them, right? And I also hear you saying abolish a mistrust in community expertise as it relates to what community needs, right? The disinvestment in community organizations has to do with a distrust that the community actually knows what it's doing, that grassroots organizations actually know what they're talking about. And so I'm just extracting that from what you said, Kris. Thank you so much for that. What else would we have to say about these notions of defunding and abolition?
I think when we talk about abolition, I think it's a deep dive. I think to abolish the systemic racism that we have experienced for so long, there are a number of things that need to be abolished: laws, decrees, ordinances, customs, taxes, debts. I could go on. So yeah, and I totally agree with you and with Kris. Totally. But there's a lot of work.
You were laughing, but I'm going to just underline debt, the abolition of debt, because one of the things I too am a minister like Alicia, and one of the things we talk about all the time is how debt hinders one's ability to tell the truth. Yes. I'm thinking about it in a kind of faith-based context. You want to be prophetic, you want to tell the truth, the unabashed, unvarnished truth, but you are tethered to these economic commitments, not even commitments, but like weights, anchors, right? That keep you from being able to tell the whole truth. And I think debt is functioning in the same way in broader society, right? What would we be able to do? How free would we be if we weren't tethered to just these astronomical amounts of debt? So thank you so much for bringing that economic piece in, Celena.
I say that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I say that based on some of my own experiences and how things really changed as my career elevated. When I wasn't needy enough, I wasn't needed.
I was going to let that silence linger. Yes. Go ahead, Alicia.
One, I just want to thank Kris. Kris, that is, honest to goodness, probably the clearest explanation of abolition that I have ever heard. And I think that that's such a gift that you just gave to us who are gathered here this morning. One of the things I think that's unfortunate sometimes, like within justice-seeking work, is that folks overcomplicate terms, and like you broke it down in such a way that was just like so clear and so concise. And I'm just very, very thankful for you doing that. But to kind of piggyback off of what you and Celena were sharing, like if we had all that resource, think about what we could imagine, right? Like, I think that these systems that exist, I mean, there's imagination going on, but it's of a nefarious sort. But like, what if the people could imagine? What if we didn't have debt? We have the brain power, we're free of the anxiety, and we could dream again. One of the things that was super cool is when we first hopped on, there were actually a couple of kids who were on screen. And I think that there's space for us to sit with what they have. Like kids have like these brilliant, active, wild imaginations, like where anything can be possible. What if as adults, as a part of like this work towards abolition, like we look to our young people and not just like ask them to share, but like actually we model them, right? Like we teach kids all the time to model us. What if we modeled them and found our way back to imagination and thinking about like, what does it mean to protect one another? What does it mean to form family? What does it mean to have things in place that would replace like these laws and ordinances that Celena was speaking about? Like, what if we dreamt together? Like, why is that something that's absent, like, of our justice seeking? Like, why aren't we dreaming? And it's because we have things like debt saddling us down. We know why, but like, what if it's a part of our defunding and deconstruction and our abolition that we dream and that we teach? We let go of like age hierarchies that like exist, right? Like that adults are somehow more knowledgeable than kids. Like we go back and learn from them, let them teach us.
Yes. T, I know that you, part of your work is around supporting LGBTQ plus re-entry, about kind of the policies that you're trying to abolish as it relates to how people come home from incarceration, especially queer folks and trans folks.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you, Kris, so much for, as well as Alicia and Celena. When I think about like comes to abolish and the policies that we're trying to definitely push and hopefully win and abolishing that, I think about community-driven solutions. Instead of us going to the government and they telling us what we have to do to get right, it's the community letting them know what we need, to continue to address the underlying issues to our neighbors that's returning home, specifically our LGBTQI community and family members and non-binary. I think that a part of reentry, nobody really thinks about the specific needs for our community when we're returning citizens. Jail support at State Road, we're now making sure that the Philadelphia Community Bell Fund is making sure that each individual who's coming home gets a safe ride home. They get a cell phone. They're met with a gift card. They got a quick needs assessment, because how do you tell someone to quarantine and go home and they have no home to go to? And just being realistic about what's going on and allowing our community to bring that healing. It's the only way that we can counteract this white supremacy is by Black love, Black power, and Black community. So us coming together and building that community, people want to get jobs. When you think about the barriers it takes to even getting a job, you have to get an ID that's now almost $50 in order to, get to an interview. And now you got, people find themselves, breaking laws just to get what they need to do the right thing or to get a job. You hustling to get an ID to get a job. And I think that once we start addressing those underlying issues and really centering the leadership of formerly impacted and POC individuals to really bring that change home to where it's not a careerism for us. This is really a change, it's not about, we want to work ourselves out of these jobs. We want to create, and lay the foundation for our kids to stand on the shoulders of giants like we're standing on. Like Frederick Douglass, when he came home, and Sojourner Truth stood on that soapbox and talked about the horrors of slavery so that other individuals can understand and push for that abolishment of, not that reform of another system of slavery. Because I feel like in Philadelphia now, when you got to purchase your freedom, that's another form of slavery. It's no amount of dollars to be able to separate anyone from their family or their community. And that's what we're hoping to push for nationally, where no one has a price as low as $30. We posted Bell this week, as high as $20,000. And you're not giving people an opportunity to even make $20,000 a year realistically, it's a problem. That means that you're meant to keep people held in the system, working for 15 cents an hour, $1 a day some days. And I feel as though, and then I strongly believe that's another form of slavery. So anyone that's sitting back and complacent of that, or is not, doing what they can, even if it makes them uncomfortable, give until it hurts, because people are uncomfortable. They miss family members. They got houses that they can't go home to, and jobs that was lost, and opportunities. This is not a spectator sport. We all have a job and an entitlement to make this generation to push for change the same way that our ancestors pushed for change for us, and that's our responsibility, and that's our civil rights movement of our generation. I feel like to make sure that those that come behind us will not have to be subjected to the same exploitation and the same of lack of opportunities, or the same condemnment of oh, you come from this situation, or you are formerly incarcerated, or you must have done something for you to, you're a different human being. No, we're no longer willing to conform to that narrative of that. So I just ask everyone that whatever privilege that you have to welcome or to back and to bring this understanding of what abolish is, and that's bringing community-driven solutions and addressing the underlying issues that we have to make this change possible.
Thank you, T. Thank you, T. I see Kris and then Celena.
I think sort of going off of what T is saying, it's like we all have committed harm and we've all been harmed. And so what does it look like if instead of trying to separate people from community, exclude people, exile people, we instead are trying to build community, make sure that folks who have committed harm actually are still feeling those connections. That's how we get to accountability. It's not about pushing people away, but about connecting us to one another. And that's how we actually can be safe, can stay safe, can keep one another safe. It's not going to be, having these like outside entities that we call. It's going to be about like the relationships that we all have with one another.
Yeah, Celena.
I just really wanted to just take a moment and just thank T for the work that you're doing. Prior to working for the city, I worked for a nonprofit organization, the LGBTQ nonprofit organization, where I shifted the focus of my program to LGBTQ folks that were coming home, being released from prison, reentry programming. And it was extremely difficult to find support for specifically LGBTQ folks. There were programs that were in place for reentry, but a lot of them were not, did not have the specifics that were needed for LGBTQ folks. That led me to starting programs that provided hygiene kits, wigs, makeup, all types of things for Black trans women that were reentering society. It grew into a great program. MAC Cosmetics donated tons of money, and it grew, and it actually still exists at the Mazzoni Center today. But I say all that to say that I want to work with you. I want I want to know about the work that you're doing, and I want to figure out how my office can support that work, because I know how difficult that work is.
I so love what's being modeled here. So, the commitment to say, oh, I can help with that, or let's figure out a way to work together. We share a vision. We share an ethic, a politic. And so let's figure out a way to work together. That in some ways is a perfect segue to this kind of last movement of the conversation, which is about, okay, here we are assembled as LGBTQ plus families, as parents, as spouses, as chosen and given families. What is our work? What is our work? This is Yari in the chat got us here, right? That what is the work for improving justice, improving our society for LGBTQ plus families? We can't outsource this. That's what I hear y'all saying. We cannot outsource this to the government. Help us. Woo. We can't outsource this to nonprofits that are themselves tethered to notions of white supremacy. We must take responsibility for making this happen. And so how would you answer that question? What is the work of LGBTQ plus families in disrupting and ultimately dismantling white supremacy? I see Kris unmuted, and then Celena.
I think that all of us as individuals have work that we need to do, have work that we could be doing to make sure that we understand these connections, to make sure that we are fighting for the folks that are most marginalized. And like in our communities, that would be Black trans women. I think also that there are demands and calls that folks are making that we need to pay attention to. There is very clearly the popular demand to defund the police. I think when people are like, what does that mean? I don't understand. How can we do that? We're ignoring that reality that people are telling us, that actually the thing that you think is keeping us safe, the thing that you think is keeping you safe is actually not working. And we need to do something different. And I mean, it's not going to be a one and done thing. It is going to be a continuous fight and a continuous struggle. And so it's also something that, this can't be something that you like kind of put on your to-do list and you check it off. Something that you really have to live and will shift and morph over time. but it's work that we all should want to do, because I think that primarily the reason that we should all be fighting to liberate us all collectively is because we really do all have a stake in this. White supremacy is not helping white people. Like, not only is it killing Black folks, is it killing other people of color, but like it is not good for white people.
Yeah, Celena?
I think when we talk about family and what families can do, I think my biggest thing is education. Educating starts in the home. And I say that just recently, since the quarantine, my family has been a lot more connected. I spend a lot more time talking and speaking with my cousins and those folks that I typically hadn't been in contact with as often. And in this time, I've realized just how uneducated some of them are. Some of the things that my cousins say, not about me, but about the LGBTQ community as a whole, is so problematic. And over these last few months, I've realized the amount of opportunities that I've missed to educate them, and I've let certain things go because they're family and because I know that they don't really mean any harm, but I've missed those moments. And I think it's important for us to not miss those moments. And because I believe it's so important, I've scheduled for my family, I'm going to be doing an LGBTQ 101 workshop for my family through Zoom to bring them up to speed, because there's a lot of things that I haven't shared with them. They don't know a lot about the real trauma that I've experienced. I've kept that from them. It's always looked like Celena's. It's been pretty easy. So when I have those moments where I'm feeling anxiety or I'm nervous about something or I'm not feeling comfortable going somewhere, they're just like, they don't get it. They don't understand it because for some reason they don't connect the bigger Black trans woman thing with me. And that's a problem. So I think it's important for us to educate those folks that are most connected to us, which is family.
Thank you, Celena. Alicia?
I think a really big part of being a revolutionary-minded queer family is embracing curiosity, because curiosity is something that's incredibly disruptive, which is why like it's something that's not pushed, right? Like let's think about like schooling, right? Like there's so much that's told to you, but how much is actually like asked of you? And so one of the questions as we've been talking, and I've been like holding in mind what we have been speaking through this morning, and specifically holding that with family, I'm curious, what does the family that you either needed or still need look like? And how can you tangibly co-create that with other people? Like let that sit with you. And I can like always type that in the chat, because that's what it means to be a revolutionary minded queer family, whether your family is chosen or it's given. You have the capacity to think about what your needs are, and going back to that place of imagination. Like if you had like that dream family, like what are its values? What are its commitments? And then how does it live into it? It's not enough to say that Black lives matter. It's not enough to say that we need to respect Indigenous sovereignty. It's not enough to say that we need to honor the land. What are you doing to back it up? What are you doing? How are you connecting your speech with your action? And how is that a family commitment? And so, yeah, I would encourage you to be curious, to interrogate, and then to think about the ways that you have either lived into the things that you say you value, or what you need to do to actually embody the things that you say you stand for. It's not enough to have the signs. It's not enough to hashtag. It's not enough to like, you know, sit in your like your little corner of the internet and say these things matter to me. What in the way that you live your life shows that these things are actually of value to you?
Thank you so much, Alicia. I don't know who carries checkbooks anymore. Maybe some people write checks, but using checkbook as a metaphor, as a symbol. You show me your checkbook, I'll show you your values, right? Drawing on this kind of, this spiritual notion of wherever your treasure is, that's where your heart is also, right? And so meaningful investments, right, in the work that you say you want to do. I hear you all saying it's got to be tangible, it's got to be real, right? One thing I would add to this is like telling our own stories with vulnerability. So one of the things that sort of grinds my gears is what I see as a kind of a voyeuristic, kind of almost like pornographic use of stories that are not our own to demonstrate our solidarity and proximity to people who are not actually in our world, right? So we can rattle off the names of the 2 Black trans women who have been killed in Philadelphia over the last 2.5, 3 months. Or we can say, we can rattle off the Black, Brown, Indigenous, telling other people's stories does not give us a pass from really investigating our own. Sometimes we need to confess, and our stories are confessional. So those might not be as, print worthy as lifting up another story, but not using other people's stories to mask our refusal to really mine our own lives for the stories we need to tell. This is what I used to think about those young, Black, queer, but this is how I've become. This is where I've grown, right? That's a story that more people need to hear. And so what are your stories as a family? And how can we, as the maybe adults in the family, model ways to confess through story to our children so that they know that this is an evolutionary work. It's revolutionary, but it's also evolutionary, right? And so we can say, yeah, we as a community have been wrong, or we as an organization have not been focused on the right things, right? And we are willing to be curious and set forward a new reality, a new politic, a new ethic. So we're going to, it's about 10:38. I want to give those of you who are with us in the room plenty of time to pose your questions to these guests. I see, yes. So please write in the chat what questions you have. And then I think it would be fine for you to unmute. I can call on you and then unmute and ask your question to the panelists. So I see, let me see here. Steph and Sarah. Oh, wait a minute. They just want to document their commitments in the chat. Look at that. Look at that. So Steph and Sarah have put in the chat commitments they're making this morning as a result of this conversation, as a result of their own work that they're going to be responsible for doing. Thank you so much, Steph and Sarah. Anybody who's here, if you have a question for our panel, question for the room, please feel free to write that in the chat, or you can raise your hand. I think, Stephanie, is that right? People can raise their hands by going to the participants part of the menu at the bottom and let me know that you have a question.
That's right, or you could use the reactions, and I'll just demonstrate. If you do reactions and put your little hand up, that's sort of the clap one, but you can also use that, and
we'll see you. Yeah. So we want to just open this up to be a broader conversation, whatever's on your mind. What are you wrestling with? What questions do you have? While we're waiting for some more questions from the room, one of the other things that we talked about as it relates to being revolutionary minded, particularly for Black and Brown and other POC queer families? What would it mean to reclaim the joy that has been stolen through racist systems and racist people, right? What would it mean to steal back the rest that was robbed in the midst of having to work and grind and work and grind and work and grind as a family, right? I think that we need to think about how claiming joy and claiming rest are revolutionary activities in the midst of this death-dealing kind of white supremacist system, right? So how as a family do you claim joy and rest? How as a family do you lament? Give yourself time to grieve what has been taken and stolen, right? So just want to offer that. Steph and Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. This has been a really incredible conversation. The question I had, I loved the part where y'all were talking about space and creating the inequity of space in the community. And as a person that doesn't, run a LGBT nonprofit, just like exists within the community, like what can individuals do? Because I definitely see that as a systemic problem, and I want to like take action steps on it. What are some action steps we can do to make our space more inclusive of other voices and create space for the folks that have been left out?
Celena?
Well, I know one of the things that when I was doing nonprofit work that I encouraged my partners to do was to offer, especially for those places that charge a fee for rental of space, offering free space to people of color that were doing any type of organizing and offering that space at no charge.
I think another thing, and this is more of a posture, you're not actually creating space, you're cultivating or curating it. And I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind, because like in creation, sometimes you think that you're making something out of nothing. There's things that are already there. There are people that are already there. And so adopting a posture where you understand that your job is to help bring things together instead of just like acting like nothing existed and now it does. That's a really big thing that you can do as a nonprofit worker and just as a person. And even if something is to come from nothing, like it's co-creation. You're not on your own in doing this.
Yeah. The only thing I would kind of add, attending to, this is more like a posture, like Alicia was saying, attending to how you occupy space. So, I mean, there's a difference between occupying a space to consume it, to, make sure that you cover all of the corners and all of the right. But there's a way to sort of be present in a space as a kind of porous, you're allowing things to move through you and with you, but you're occupying a space that's not an impediment to others' occupation of the spaces. I use this word occupation, but being present in a space in a way that allows other people to be fully present in the space as well. Yeah.
And kind of piggyback on what Naomi's sharing, be okay with things being messy. When people come together, in coalition building and in relationships of all sorts, it is messy. Like you're not coming from the same, especially when you don't come from the same social location and you have different, things impacting your day-to-day. Allow space for messiness. Everything doesn't have to be tied up with a bow. Like everything doesn't have to be neat and like ordered in a certain way. That's part of adopting this posture of being revolutionary and even embodying the values of a revolutionary family in your workplace. Give space for the mess. Everybody has mess. Mess always happens. Don't try to hide it. Let it be.
Yeah, thank you so much, Naomi and Alicia, for that. I think far as like holding space and like what people can do also is, that sense of entitlement. Like check yourself. When you walk down the street and you feel uncomfortable, James Baldwin said it so eloquently. Is it the mere color of my skin that makes you feel uncomfortable? You know what I'm saying? Like, acknowledge why do you, go into the store and you look at this person a certain way, or if you're walking down 13th Street and you see these group of young kids, why do you feel as though your nose got to googly up or think that they're trying to get in some type of wayward trouble? Acknowledge that racism within yourself and challenge yourself. Challenge what you was taught. Challenge what you, perceived as what you thought these young kids was doing or, or up to, or in those individual things. So I would definitely, start with challenging yourself against the biasm that, you have, that people have or have been taught to have within our community, and break that down. Check yourself, and then try to be that change that you hope to see. But it starts within yourself to really, like, why am I uncomfortable? Why is they making me feel like this space is no longer mine? And that privilege that you have, or that entitlement, step back and allow another individual to step up. I think that's just powerful within itself, to be able to step back and allow an individual that has the longing to be a part of these communities. Sometimes it can feel like a fraternity, even just trying to volunteer. You got to know this person, or know that person. Welcome, them in. And volunteering saves so many, when you start developing positive habits and you start being around people that really want to see change, and then you're given these opportunities to fill your day in with uplifting and impactful work, it can change your whole community. So don't separate yourself from, what you're going on above here. I say break down that hierarchy and really welcome people in, and check yourself as to why you're not or don't feel comfortable being around or welcoming people into that space, particularly people of color.
I think one thing I wanted to add was that my partner frequently tells me to take up space. Which is something that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should say something. Oh, I don't know. And she'll just kind of be like, no, you should take up space. And so I think, especially calling on other Black people, other people of color, to take up space. That there is something that is liberating in that. There's something that is freeing, and I think kind of going off of what Naomi was saying about rest, and about I think one of the things I struggle with is this idea that in order to get back to wholeness, we have to undo this harm. That the idea of what does it mean for Black people to be free? We have to think about in the context of dismantling white supremacy. We can't just think about it in the context of why can't we all just be whole Black people? It's we have to undo this thing, and then we can get to this moment where we're actually whole. And so I mean, yeah, there will be days when the only thing I do is watch Netflix and at this moment crochet, and I'm I could feel bad about this. I could feel like I'm not being productive, but there's also people who I know and love currently who do not have who can't do that. There are folks who I know and love who are locked in cages at this point 23 hours a day, supposedly for their safety during this pandemic. And it's the fact that I can chill in my bed with my cat and watch Netflix is this thing that I should be thankful for, and I should do, even though capitalism says it's not good to do.
Yeah, that's a word to me. I'm picking up on Tareem's question about being revolutionary when you're just trying to tread water on a daily basis, trying not to drown. What can we do? And I hear you saying, Kris, just be. That being itself is a revolutionary act in a culture that is constantly trying to limit your ability to be. picking up on my favorite poem by Lucille Clifton, won't you celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me, but has failed, right? That alone is reason for celebration. And for me, workaholism is a trauma response. I'm very clear. I'm very clear, right? And so, and for many of us, perhaps that's true. And so to stop working is a commitment to not allowing myself to just be responding to trauma, right? And to see Blackness as its own value and not as defined over and against whiteness, right? I can only be Black if I'm out here fighting white supremacy. No, actually, no. So yeah, there's one more question I want to probe from the chat, and then I want to give you each a minute to tell us how we can invest, and I'm using that word very deliberately, in your work. So whether that's sharing a website or sharing something you want to share with us, I want to end with that. How do we have these conversations with our children? We talked about a lot of complex stuff. How do we have these conversations with the children in our lives?
I was looking at the chat as well, and I liked the response that Chantel gave, that we have 1,000 little conversations. I like that. I spent a lot of time working at CHOP with the families that were a part of the PACS program. And, you know, I think a lot of times we don't give kids, you know, enough accountability, and they're very smart. Some of the things that we found that we were sharing with them, they already knew. So I think it's important to have those little conversations, those tough conversations, as often as possible. Like she said, there are times when they don't want to continue talking about those things, and you have to back up, but always circle back and continue those conversations. And it goes back to what I said, continuing to educate. And I think a lot of times we'll find that kids know a lot more than we think they do.
I'll co-sign that. Yeah, I think that was like just a brilliant sharing in the chat, having those 1,000 little conversations. But I think it's parents, one of the things that I think it's also important to understand in your having these conversations with your kids is that they are your kids, they aren't your peers. And so just be discerning in how you share things. So my parents had very different parenting philosophies. My mom is like, I'm your mom, not your friend. And my dad's like, I'm your friend and your dad. And there was a difference in the degree of openness that I had with my father because friendship was a part of what was on the table as a parent. But at the same time, you know, there are boundaries as parents that you need to just be able to keep up. They're kids and their minds are still developing. And I know that, you know, this seems like, okay, yeah, we know this, but like, there are some things that you take to other members of your family who are not the children. As you evolve, as you grow, as you're fearful of things, yes, let your kids see part of this, enter into enough friendship with them where they see that, like, you know, my parent is grieved, or these are things that it's okay to grieve in the world. But the heavy, take it to other members in the family in order for them to like guide you through that. So yeah, share, but like don't overshare because that could also be a problem.
I think also breaking generational curses. I mean, the things that you thought, or the biasm that you grew up with, to end that, you know, with that next generation, with that family, you know, say, hey, you know, love is love, you know, regardless of what this person is. If you see something, stand up. And I think that's the most powerful thing we can do, is raise our kids not to have those same bias or that same discrimination as a child. You know, just let them know that if you see someone is getting picked on, or if you see someone acting funny to another person of color, like stand up, say something. And once we implement that at a young age, I think it will become more natural to unlearn it, to just teach kids to love as they are, you know, and like love no matter what, or not be afraid because this person's skin is darker than yours, or that their family is different. So I think it, you know, it drives back home. And the honesty, like our community is a family. You know, I feel like I've been raised by so many different people from in the community. I like when I was young, I learned that I called it eat the meat and spit out the bones. I'll take what's good that I needed to empower myself or learn from the lessons of others. And that, you know, the examples that I had, I didn't look down at them. I just looked at as was an opportunity for me to learn from their mistakes. But, you know, those mentors that we have throughout our family, those kids that you see that walk down the streets, they're an extension of us. They're an extension of what our future is going to look like. And it's not to say like that's not my personal family, because as a community, we are one. You know, we are a family. And I just think it would be so much better if we teach people to love instead of how to learn how to not hate.
I think also just one little thing I wanted to add, it was just that like recognizing that that like young people are hearing things all over, and so you know just like walking around, they're getting messages, and so like making sure that they feel safe and comfortable enough to be like, hey, I heard this thing, like what's going on with that? I think to this day, one of the most meaningful conversations I've had with my little cousin, who is 14 years younger than me, was after Trayvon Martin died or was killed, and like talking to him about the connections between like, you know, him being at that point, I think he was like 12 or 13, and I was like, yeah, you know, this is something that like is relevant to you, and him being like, but I'm like a little kid. Like how could this like impact me? Was I think really, really like generative and like really profound for both of us.
Thank you all. Leona, I see your hand. Let's welcome your question.
So hi, thanks everyone for everything you've shared, and I want to actually sort of echo a couple things. One of the first things I actually want to say is, you know, this is National Coming Out Day weekend, and it really reflects one of the most important things that we can do, which is all of us can sort of stand up and claim who we are, and claim who we are in a way that we're not apologetic and we're not worrying about what somebody else is going to say. Some of the best ways that we're able to help to share and educate people and make those changes is to help them be aware of some of the things that are going on. And I say that, and I'm learning to sort of accept this at this point as being one of the more of the elders of this community, having been out for the last 35 plus years, having been being born biracial before loving, having dealt with racial issues for over 50, that one of the things I can say is we should be celebrating because we've come a long way and there's a ton more to do. And what I would really like to encourage is that we all help to not only work together as we open doors, that we make sure that we open the doors for those behind us, but also for those that are coming through those doors, stop and ask us so we can help share the tools and the ways that we've learned that have gotten us as far as we have, so that we can help to really build on and accelerate this pace of change. Because I'm actually hoping that when I manage to finally leave this earth, we're not still fighting the same things that I was fighting when I came out 35 years ago. And so really want to help to encourage to say, welcome the voices of everybody, and also take the time to ask everybody around you so you can help learn and help educate and help make a difference.
Thank you so much, Leona. There is wisdom among our elders, and there is wisdom among our young, right? And what white supremacy wants to do is keep those lines drawn so that we are not talking to each other and not valuing the wisdom that's already present in community. Thank you so much, Leona. I want to take this last minute to offer to our panelists a moment to share with us how we can invest in your work. So let's start with Kris.
Hi, you can check out Amistad Law Project's work at www.amistadlaw.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. We do work in a number of coalitions. Coalition for, oh my goodness, wow. CADB, which is the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration. And then also we're a part of the Alliance for a Just Philadelphia. Recently, as in yesterday, one of our comrades, who we know through Alliance for Just Philadelphia, was released from Philadelphia police custody for some totally ridiculous charges from Virginia, with like an action that I think we would all consider to be like super low risk. Nancy Wynn, a Viet lead. And so, yeah, just also want to lift up those folks and that work, and the, you know, sort of note the connections between ICE and police and law enforcement of all sorts. And there's also, I see Jennifer on here. There's Bread and Roses Tribute to Change that's happening on this coming Tuesday that folks should check out. They support a lot of really awesome work around the city and around the region. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kris. Thanks, Kris. Celena.
Sorry. Like I said, Celena Morrison from the Philadelphia Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs. You can follow us on social media. We on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Contact my office. We are always doing community partnering. We've been hosting a lot of community conversations. Just following us on social media will be a great way to kind of keep up with what's going on with the office. Also, I am trying to find the link now. I'm going to put the link in the chat to the COVID-19 resource guide that the office created, where we took a ton of resources and tailored those resources to the needs of the LGBTQ community. And bi-weekly, we tend to update those resources, so they're always good. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat.
Thank you, Celena. Alicia.
So you can follow my work in a few different places, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, at Alicia T. Crosby. And my website is aliciatcrosby.com. I try to make it really simple for everyone. And if you'd like to support my work in any way, because Naomi did say invest, I also have a Patreon. And this like helps me continue on doing the work that I do publicly, because I do consultancy primarily. And that is Patreon at Alicia T. Crosby. Basically, if you Google Alicia T. Crosby anything, you'll find me.
Thank you. Thank you. And T.
Again, thank you everybody for joining this morning, and the Philadelphia Community Bell Fund.
Wait a minute. T, we went back on mute briefly. Go.
Sorry, okay. So you can find me at LaTonya at philipbellout.org. That's my email address. Or
oh no, went on mute again.
I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry. So what I was saying was LaTonya at philipbellout.org, as well as philipbellout.org is our website. If you're interested in, helping liberate any individual, specifically LGBTQI individuals that's currently locked down on State Road, we post bail was as low as $30 that you can help liberate an individual. And we also have a Black Support Caucus. So if anyone's interested in joining that Black Support Caucus, we want to connect people with support, mentorship, and address all the underlying issues, or just give that community embrace. So if you're interested in becoming a part of that Black Support Caucus or any other resources that you think that might be able to help LGBTQI returning citizens home, please be sure to email me at LaTonya at philipbellout, or stop past the website, which is philipbellout.org. Thank y'all so much.
I want to say thank you to Kris, Celena, Alicia, and LaTonya T for joining us this morning for this robust and meaningful and powerful conversation about how we can continue to make resistance an active way of being and doing and not a spectator sport. If you want to save the chat, that might be helpful for folks. If you want to save the chat, there should be 3 little dots over in your chat window. If you click those dots, you should see save chat as an option so that you don't have to worry about missing what happened in the chat. And this session is being recorded, as you know. So thank you so much, Stephanie, Philly Family Pride, board members, everybody in them for convening and curating this conversation. I'm going to turn it back over, I think, to Stephanie.
Actually, it's me. And I love the heart emojis, emoticons. So thank you, Naomi, and the rest of the panelists. This was a really amazing conversation. We haven't had conversations like this in quite some time at Philadelphia Family Pride, and this is definitely the time to have it. So again, thank you all. So our panelists are going to stick around for a few minutes. If anyone wants to stay and chat, remember to please fill out the eval of the session. Stephanie will put the link in the chat if she already hasn't. Next up is a 15-minute break, and then the next session is at 11:15 a.m. The topics are COVID-19 in kids, parenting through a pandemic, transparent, raising our voices, and what's on your bookshelf.